Okay, so what we're going to be talking about in the beginning, this is like some kind of an introduction to database security. Of course, the security related topics are kind of broad and there's a lot of subtopics that we can talk about, but here it's just an introduction and we talk about what is related to that security part that we will be practicing, we'll be working with. But there are different types of, facets of the security aspect of a database that we're not going to be going into the details of that. But I just would like to give you some kind of idea about some problems that might happen with the databases and how we can deal with those problems. Well, at least we should be aware of these are the type of problems that can happen. So that's the topic of this week, inshallah. I'll fall back into these presentations because there's some kind of concept that I'd like to talk about, and we'll get back into the practical part just immediately afterwards. Now let's first of all, I'm not going to go into all these details, but let's say the threats to the databases are the loss of integrity, availability, and confidentiality. Remember those, for those who have taken computer security, these are called the CIA Triad. Well, we call it CIA so it's easy to remember because almost everyone knows the CIA and how gentle they are. And yeah, so but let's have a look at these. Integrity means what? What is the integrity?
Only authorized users can modify the information.
So making sure that authorized users are
The only one
who can modify the
data.
the database, the information, the data. Any other? Do you agree with that? Yes. So to prevent any unauthorized changes to the data, and availability. Available to users and developers. What does this mean? Availability means making sure that the database, because now we're talking about databases, is always available to be logged in, accessed, and working. Now the threat to this availability is something, let's say for example, we disconnect physically the server, the database server, from the network. Someone just cuts the cable. Now this is a threat to the availability. Now the server is there running everything, the database is ready, prepared, secured, whatever, but you cannot access to it. Nobody can access to it remotely. So that's the idea, of the availability, making sure that we secure the connection and the availability, not only about connection but also the system itself. Like, let's say for example my database on this machine, and I do something and then I stop the machine, I shut it down. Now the database is there, available, not available, because it's there but it cannot work. It's not working, so it's not available to be used. Not because there's a problem with the connection or the database itself, but the problem with the hardware running the database. So the availability is that part. And what about the confidentiality? Yes.
Not allow any unauthorized users to open or look at the data.
So the data, we don't like to have it being seen by someone who is not authorized to see it. So we'd like to make sure that those that are seeing something from the database, they're allowed to see it. For example, now in a database with of a company, employees, there are a lot of information about the employees, but also their salary. For example, not everyone is publicizing the salary of each employee. So the accounting department is the one who knows the salaries generally. The others, they just know the parts that are related to their work. They don't need to have a look at the salary. So we can just split those things and give permission to special people to have a look at special data and prevent others from looking at the other type, that data. Now from a table point of view, let's say we have one table with all this information. How can we split these permissions, we make views. Remember the views? Which is like a query that returns some kind of result, and then you save it and give it a name. Now if I'd like to, for example, allow some users to see all the table employee except the salary, I will create a view that displays everything except the salary, and then I give it a name, and then I authorize these users to have access to this view, which is like the table but just a part of it. The other part, they're not seeing it. And same thing if I would like to have some other parts that I would like to exclude, or if I have different groups of data that I would like some people to be able to see. So the views are going to be a good way how to give those permissions based on some type of data that I would like to allow to be seen. And that's the type of things that we did not practice much, but I just wanted you to realize the usefulness of the views, because we have not used them practically a lot, so you don't maybe see the benefits from those. The views also can be used as when you have a very complicated query that includes a lot of tables, to simplify that query. So you have to then be creating a subset of the query, saving it as a view, and then you can link it together with other tables or with other views as well. So it's kind of a very useful tool if you'd like to handle a lot of complicated queries that you'd like to deal with. So these are some of these things that are related to, we're talking about the threats to integrity, availability, and confidentiality. These are the core of the security issues that can happen among any system, not only databases, but any system. Anything will fall into one of these three main components. Now, how to protect against that? There are many different types of ways, but we're not going to be focusing on all of these. We're going to be focusing mainly talking about the access control. That will be our main focus. And the encryption is something I'd like you to just have some kind of introduction to it, just to have an idea about what it is. Now, this access control, there's a lot of different type of access controls. There's some discretionary access control, which you give permission to one user, or role-based access control, which is not mentioned there, but somewhere along the line in the slides later on. Role-based is like a group. You give permission to a group. And you have this mandatory access controls, which are something that is kind of system that are mainly applied to, let's say, like top secret, and confidential, like levels of clearances. Like if someone has a level of clearance that is high, then he has access to some type of information. If he has a lower, then he has access to some, not to others, and things like that. So these are the types of, this is the mandatory, but we're not going to be looking into that. What we're going to be working on mainly is we're going to be practicing the discretionary access control. There are some SQL commands that we're going to be learning how to use them, and you're going to be giving permission to each other. So you can, okay, I give you permission on my database to have you can be able to see, or maybe you can able to update or just delete and not see. So we're going to be working on the different type of scenarios on the discretionary access control. Discretionary means just I give permission to one user. I will show you also what we can do as a group, but because of the time constraint, we're not going to be looking into that. But you can create some group role-based access control, which you put a user into a group, and you can put many users into one group, and then give them permission to the group. That's something you can also do. And MySQL Workbench will allow you to do that as well. Now, the idea behind that, let's say, for example, for all the teachers, for example, I'd like to give them a specific set of permissions. Not to one user, but all users that share some common action or some common role. That's the group or role-based access control. And basically, again, we're going to practice mainly this discretionary access control, which we give permission to a specific user to do a specific thing. So we'll see that inshallah in few minutes. Now, what I'd like to mention is we're going to, well, I'm going to skip some of the parts because we're not going to be talking about them. Encryption later on. But who is doing the security thing, these settings? Who is working with that? Well, that's the DBA, which is the database administrator. He's the one who is implementing, but the decision doesn't come to him. He's not the one who initiates the decision. Basically, the management is going to decide who has access to what, and then the database administrator is going to implement those decisions. Well, that's what happens in big organizations. So this will have allowing the grant permissions, revoke permissions, and these are the two terms that you need to remember, because there are some SQL statements that are related to these with these two terms. I'm going to grant a permission to a user or revoke a permission from a user. Now, what are the types of permissions? The type of permissions that we can grant are anything that the user can do: create, update, delete, drop. Of course, you understand the difference between drop and delete, right? What's the difference between drop and delete? You drop a schema, you drop a trigger, you drop a table. So this is what part of the learning, the languages that we're using is the data definition languages. So you can, if you would like them to allow some user to be able to create tables, to drop tables, to alter tables, or triggers, etc., procedures, you can do that. So I can give permission to create a table, but not put the data, because he's not the one responsible for the data. Someone else is going to be responsible for the data. So these are type of permissions. I'll just swap here back to this MySQL workbench because I'd like to show you how this is turning out. Now let me show you practically how this is done. Let's say here, if you open like this kind of, I just opened a connection. Once I opened the connection, I just clicked on here server status. So this gives you a lot of information of the server, it's running, blah blah blah, etc. But that's not our focus. Our focus is here, users and privileges. If you click on that, you can see now these are all your users, and you'll see your username there. Now let me create a new one just for fun, so you can see what's the new user is going to be. Now when I create a user, I specify the login, the type of authentication, and where he can log in from. This percentage means like the star, anything. And you can specify that I want this user to be allowed to log in only from a specific IP or a group of IPs, addresses, or whatever. I can specify some kind of restriction on the login, or just leave it like this, which means he can log in from wherever he wants. No restriction. But I can also make restrictions if I want. Then you specify the password, you confirm it. You can put some kind of limits on how many queries he can run per hour. So I want him not to be making the server busy too much or something. Now this is generally, you do that if you have a lot of users and a lot of them are using a lot of queries, which might make the server busy, and when the server is busy, he cannot serve others. So that's why this can be done. You can have this max query, max updates, max connection, etc. Concurrent connections at the same time, how many connections the same user can have. So you can have access to those. Then these are the group of permissions that he can be part of. So if you want to give him some kind of group of permissions, then you can select. You see, these are the privileges or permissions, and if you select some of them, it will show you, okay, what are the others that he can have access to. So if it's a database manager, for example, so he has access to all these, but he's not creating users, for example. He's not creating, executing things, or, well, there's a lot of things that we have not seen that I don't want to talk about. But he cannot shut down, for example, the server, things like that. So anyways, there's some that basically the DBA has all of them, but he can some kind of tailored ones. He just need to do some kind of maintenance. So he does some show the databases, shut down, maybe look at the events, things like that. But anyways, these are some of these. And now let me talk to you about what I'm expecting you for the scope of this course. We're not going to be understanding each one of these permissions. What we're going to focus on is just the permissions that we use to work with. Which ones? Alter. Alter routine is the one that allows us to change a routine. We have create a routine and create the one that creates a table. These two, we're not going to see them. Let me just maybe. We worked with routines, so create a routine. We worked with tables, and we worked with also creating routines. These are not there. We will create users, create view, and there's this delete, drop. We have not seen these. Grant option, definitely we're going to see that. We're going to be talking about it in a minute. Inserts, we can insert, and we would like to select and trigger and update. So these are the main ones that we use, and we're going to be talking about those, inshallah. I'll put something on the blackboard. I think I did that on my old website for the last semester. That's why I did not find it here. I need to just bring it back and put it on this website, so you can see that which permissions that we're going to be focusing on. Now, what I can do also, I can specify permission per database. Now these are either general permissions, or I can specify some permissions just for a specific database, so he can have access to select in this database, now update on the other one, and things like that. Now let me show you now. I just would like to revert all these and show you some of the users. Now this is what I did for you. Basically, this is the same part. Nothing was changed here. I did not select anything from here. It's all blank because I give you permission on a specific type of schema, which is now when I give you a schema, you see, I give you permission here on a specific one. Now let's say if I'd like to give you a specific on one specific schema. Let me just can we just double click to edit? No, I cannot. Okay, if I add an entry, I just would like to specify some specific schema that I can select myself, that I can give you some kind of permission, or I can have some kind of a pattern, and this is what I did here. That's why I told you can create any database any schema as long as you start with S, your full ID, and whatever comes afterwards. That's how you do that. I put your S and then your full ID and then a percentage, means anything that comes after that, that's okay. That's why you cannot create something that doesn't have this kind of pattern. And yes?
Did you use the S and then the star 10 times? Same as we learned?
No, I use this. For each one of you, I give him the permission not to access any ID that has S and underscores. Now you access your own tables, your own databases. If I want you to access everybody's databases, then I will do this, what you mentioned, like underscores, which means as long as your ID has the same number, then you have access to it. But that's not what I want. I wanted you to access only your own databases. So each one has its own set of databases that he has access to. So you don't get confused with the same database in different people's. And then when you specify that, then you can specify, for example, I choose what's the, let's say I'm going to choose company, for example, just for the sake of this example. And then I can specify what are the privileges that you can do on this database. This user can do. Now I selected this user, he has access to this already, and I would like to give him access to something else. And this is how I can do that manually. Now I can do that not only manually, I would like you to learn how to do that in terms of, no, this is not manually, this is like using this MySQL workbench. What I mean with manually, by putting the commands. But let's say if you'd like to give some kind of select and insert and update, I don't want you to delete, and you can see the views, for example, or I just would like to select them all. Notice that select them all leaves one out. What this one out? This grant option means if I give you this permission, Now the user who I'm giving the permission to can also give permissions on what he has permission to access. What does this mean? Now if I give you permission, for example, like this, to company, you can do anything, but you cannot give the permission to another user to access the company. You as a user, you can do whatever you want because I gave you all the permissions, but you cannot give any permission or part of it to another one. But if I click on this, now any permission you have, you can also give it to another one. Of course, you cannot give what you don't have. For example, if let's say unselect all, I give you only the select and insert, and with the grant option. Now you cannot give the delete on this company to somebody else because you don't have the permission. But with the grant option means anything you have, you can also give it share to with another user. That's what it means. So that's the type of thing that we're going to be dealing with. Now how to write this down, we're going to be seeing how to do that. But I just wanted you to get an idea about how these things are. Now, the DBA's responsibility is to make sure that those are set correctly. So you give permissions to those that are needing to get the permissions, and make sure that, for example, if an employee leaves the organization, privileges should be removed, should be revoked. That's the term that we use. We grant the permission and we revoke permissions. And that's what we're going to be working on. But I also want to show you that you can also give some kind of permission to a group of users by doing something like this. Now when you create in this, let me open one of the schemas, let's say this one. Now this is the model. Okay, it doesn't exist anymore. Or anyways, let me open one. No. Okay, the H is a problem. What is H? H. Okay, now let's try again. It seems there's a problem. What is it? String too long? Okay, let me try to open some. Okay, maybe there's one. Okay, let me open this one. Seems to be local. Oh, this one is local too. Open. Alright. Maybe there's a bug. Is it a bug or there's something wrong? I hope this is going to work. If it doesn't, yeah, it seems it was a bug. Okay, now you see here, well, this is some kind of this is the company database, but here you see in the schema privileges you can add the users here. Now what does this do? This is going, when you do the forward engineering, it will create also the users and also the permission to give some kind of group of users the same type of permissions, etc. That's what you can do here by adding here add a user. It's just going to create a user, you specify the password, and what are the roles that he have. Now these are the predefined roles that are given that you can also change if you want to. Let me just cancel that. And if you open this, so it tells you if you're owner what type of roles you can do. You can also add a new role if you want to, and what kind of things that can be done. You can insert just read only, see only, and things like that. So these are some kind of a group. You can put many users in the same role. So if I have user 1, user 2, user 3, whatever, user 4, and I can just give them different roles. So let me close this. User 1, for example, I can choose which role he has. For example, just let's say this one. So he has table read only. The user 2 also table read only. So now, or if I open this insert, I can specify, I can make some kind of relationships between the roles, but I thought maybe I could use this to select the user, but no. I just need to select the users. Each user specify the role in manually. You can insert. I can have more than one role if I want to. You can insert and modify, for example, or something like that. So anyways, this is what you can do in terms of the working with the privileges that you can give to a specific schema. So I'm just going to close this because I don't want to save these. Don't save. Now there's something else that I would like to talk to you about. This is some kind of a threat. Let me go back to here. That's when the database administrator is dealing with, he has to also work with that. And that is I think I'm going off topic a little bit because this is something else, but the type of problems with the security of the database is something that we call SQL injection. Now what does this mean, this SQL injection? That means if, I don't know if I can just maybe find, I think you can find some SQL injection. I don't know if there's something that I can show you. Yeah, maybe I'm just looking for something like this. Now what does this SQL injection means? For example, you have something that is going to read, let's say this, you have a web page that is going to read your password and username and password. Now in the place where you put the password, imagine someone is putting not only the password but something, I don't know if I can say some kind of an example here. No, I think okay, like for example here, see in the username or the password. Now if someone is using something like this, what is going to happen? Maybe let me just give an example of my own. If you're going to be using a username and password, let's say, what is the query that you're going to be using to know if the username has access to this website? You're going to check if the password exists, right? If you do something like this, select star from, let's say, users, where the username is equal to, now let's user1, and the password is equal to, now this is the password given by the user. That's what you should do, right? Something like this. I'm just talking to the type of query that is going to be in the background after you click login. Something is going to be something similar to this. Now the thing is, if someone has some kind of knowledge about SQL, what he can do is the following. Instead of typing his username, he can type this. Now the first thing he can do is type something like you, and hold on, I just would like to type it separately so you can see it. Instead of user1, so I'm going to replace user1 with this. Or just leave it like this. Let me make it simple. Something like this now. If I replace this user1 with this, what is going to happen? So this is what I did. You can just replace this with this. Let me just put it back here. So this user1, I replace it with this thing. Now what is going to happen is this becomes a query. And this becomes another query. And this becomes something wrong. That is going to tell, oh, there's something wrong, but we don't care about this. But look, this is what I'm interested in. I was able to inject some query within a query. That's what is SQL injection. I mean, some kind of like low, very basic SQL injection can be about. So that means when someone is using what you prepared already to access the database, but he's going to also inject some code of his own just to compromise the database. Now this can be delete all, which is very destructive, or maybe he can just say select star from users. Now he would like to see which users he can be able to see, maybe something like that. So it depends on what are the intentions of the injector. It can be destructive, like something like this. Or just something like breaching the security. Is going to be able to breach one of the, which ones? Which one is now lost? Confidentiality? and integrity depending on what he did. If he destroyed, that's the integrity. If he just have a look at the information he wasn't supposed to be looking at, that's the confidentiality. So this type of thing, there's a lot of different type of examples, and of course this is a very simple one. This can be there are many more elaborated ones. You can just Google that if you're interested. But there's a lot of things that we can do to compromise a database by using these injections.
How do you start it?
Are we?
How do you start it?
Well, when you program it, you're going to be dealing with making sure that you, for example, run only one query, not be able to run more than one. So you have to do some checking before you allow anything that the user gives you, and then assume that he's going to always give you something right. You have to double check whatever the user gives you as an input, and if you find something that you don't like, you remove. For example, you can just check for the string. If there's a semicolon, for example, then you don't accept that as a username, for example. So you can just do some kind of verification that is going to prevent this from happening in the first place. But this, I wanted you to know that there are some things that can happen that is going to break everything. By the way, let me show you some other things, but this is about security, but it's not related to database. We'll talk about it maybe another time. No, maybe another time, because it's another thing that you might know already, but I don't want to go off topic for too long. So now what we would like to be doing is to have to give permissions and revoke those permissions. And this is the job again that we said the database administrator or someone that was given that permission to do that. So you can have access to give creating accounts, and we can create accounts by just using some kind of create user. And by the way, when I created your accounts, I did not create one by one all the accounts. It will take ages for me to do that. But what I did, I don't know if I have the code here that I can share with you. Yeah, I generated something like this, create accounts. Now this was generated using a Java file, a Java program. Oh, that's not good. We open with you know what? Open with Chrome. This is open with Chrome. I hope it's not going to download it. Yeah. So you can see now what I did. I created every schema, and this is automated basically. And I created the user, and this is how you can create a user with this username and the password. And then I give all permissions, grant all privileges on this database that is going to be anything that is going to be started with this S and then the percentage dot star any table database schema dot what comes afterwards is the table, other tables. So to this user that I just created, and then with the grant option, remember the grant option, the one that you're allowed to give permissions to others. So I give you this grant option, so just for this day when it arrives, you can be able to access that and give permissions to others. And I just put this into some kind of a for loop to generate all these. Yes. 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 Give that to others. Remove something from me? No. No, you cannot remove something from me. You can remove something from me if you give me something. Now let's say you give me some permission, then you would like to remove it. Yes, you can. You can grant a permission, and then you can revoke it from the user that you gave the permission to, but you cannot just revoke from another one that you have not given any permission to, granted any permission to him. Yes. No, but because this happens only on here. He might be is an administrator on this database, but not on others. He's like the main guy on this database. He can do whatever he wants on this schema, but not on other schemas.
I remove the ID and just
The percentage create, grant all privileges on to
database that you know.
percentage. Well, then he becomes like an administrator, because he have access to all schemas, and he can do whatever he wants.
I can access to you, I would say.
Well, you can put privileges on others, yes, because you have access on those schemas. You can do whatever you want, so you can then revoke me from doing that.
So the man that has the powerful privilege is the man who created the
No, he can. The database administrator might create a database, and then give the users of this database to other users.
He cannot remove them from he gave me the counter.
No, you can't.
Anything from him.
No, you can't.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But
Yeah.
he can remove from him.
Yes,
So the man who created the database is who is taking control.
yes. He's the boss. So, anyways, now this is the code. If you'd like to create a user, it's not something that is complicated. As you can see, create user, you give a username, and then identified by, then you put a password. And that's the code to create a user every time. So if you'd like to account creation, means you need to have to do something like this. Then privilege granting is that you give some kind of privilege. Now I use grant all privileges on this, but I can also grant, I don't know, I cannot change anything. I can just grant something else. I can just grant select. But if I'd like to have, now the user can select only from any table from this database. Or if I'd like to specify a specific table, let's say this means now any database that has some kind of company as a table, then you have access to, you can select it. But if you do this, that means any table from this schema. When I refer to schema and database, the same way. Schema is a database and the database is schema. Just sometimes I use the two different distinguish, and sometimes I don't. So I'm just confusing you. Schema, database for me are the same at this point. I will use more schema so I don't avoid the database. The database is the whole system, database management system. But let's refer to this as a schema. So if I use select, insert, no, I just meant comma, not dot. That's how I can grant some specific privileges to this user on this schema. And if I don't give this grant option, that means he cannot give that permission to anyone. But if I give the grant option, that means he can give these permissions, only these permissions. He cannot grant another permission from to another user. And that's what I'd like you to try. Later on, I'd like you to try to give permissions to each other to be seen or updating or inserting and things like that. And that's what I'd like you to do actually, basically now. And later on, what we're going to know how to revoke those permissions. And in a later date, like on Wednesday, inshallah, we're going to be doing some kind of exercise when we have to do both of these. For example, I would like you to give permission to all, be able to see everything from all databases, but only modify a few. So I'd like to ensure to do that. So we need to put the grant and the revoke at the same time for these different tables. And that's what we would like to practice on. The last part we're going to be working on is how to use some basics of encryption. Like for example, if we just mentioned previously that we had some kind of users. Now, if someone does this select all from user, so select star from user. Now, yeah, I just forgot completely what I was about to talk about. I wanted to mention, yeah, for the encryption. Thank you. Now, if he does this select star from users, now this is called the password is stored in plain text. which means if you select all, you're going to see the password. Now we'd like to encrypt that password. So even if you do select all, you see it encrypted, so you're not going to be even be able to read, understand it, making sense of it. So that's the we'll do some small example on that, inshallah, on Wednesday, and that will be what is going to be the focus of this security thing, and yeah, that will be what is going to be included in the practical exam as well, and how to grant, how to revoke, and how to create a user, and that's it mainly. Yes. The three. Yeah, insert, grant, revoke. In the final practical, yes. That's what is going to be part of it. Yes. Yes. Yes, to allow the user that was given some permission to give that permission as well on that specific schema or table that he has access to. Like here, this is the schema. The table, no, this is the schema. The user is here. So basically, the general form is that you mention the privileges on the schema dot the tables or table or star to the user, and this is optional. I'm just going to mention this like that, which means if you give him the grant option, that means he can give back the permission. If you don't give it the grant option, then you just got access to. Yes.
About the privilege that I can give a user.
Yes.
On a table, I need it just not on the table, just one specific. You said like some.
A specific column, then instead of a table, you let me just do this table / view. It's in a table or view. Then if you want a specific column that he can access to, then you create a view which just shows only that column, and then you give him permission to that one. Yes.
Why don't you write the grant option with the privileges at the beginning?
Because I'm not the one who designed MySQL's programming language, and then they made it this way. So I don't know why they didn't include this with the grant in the.
It's the privilege, right? Somebody should put it in the privilege.
Yeah, but they want to make it. I think my guess is that they want to make it sure that you know what you're doing, so you don't just have it with the set of privileges that you might not see it correctly. Now, when you do that, you see clearly that you're giving the grant option. Yes. To make users, what do you mean? Give a to create users? Yeah, you see, I remember that we saw among the different privileges that there was one about create user. So if we go here, and let's go to someone, so you can just go here. So you see, among the different ones, there's something that is called create user. So you can give that permission to be able to create users. I'm sorry?
If I have as a user, create a column. Okay? Can I give him all the option that I don't want, or just
No, when you have a permission, you'd like to give it to another one. You give only what you have access to. So if you have access to create user, then you can give it, but you cannot give some others that you don't have access to. So that's the main thing. The grant option gives you the permission to grant whatever you have, not whatever is possible to grant. So that's what it is.